Hello everyone. So this is the NCERT as it is video on S block elements group 2. So already in the first part video, right, we covered the group 1. So there will be obviously a lot of to and fro, or we'll try to correlate with what we already did in the group 1. So those who are looking at this video can also take a look at the group 1 video, so that you will be able to correlate the things better, because as per the NCERT coverage, right, it is not like 2 chapters, it is like just 1 chapter. Okay, so we'll start with the understanding of the group 2 elements. So group 2 elements starting from beryllium, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium, radium. Of course radium is radioactive, and these elements, right, we call them as alkaline earth metals except beryllium. So the reasoning we already discussed in the first video, but we'll again give it here. The reason is the oxides and hydroxides of these elements, they show basic nature or alkaline nature, and also these metal oxides, right, they will be present in the earth's crust. See the topmost layer of the earth, that's why we call them as alkaline earth metals. Of course the exception for beryllium is because beryllium oxide and hydroxide, they will not be basic, they will be, we'll see that they will be in fact amphoteric. Okay, so the beryllium will differ from the rest of the alkaline earth metals, and it will also have similarity with like if you look at the position in the table, right, beryllium, then you know we'll have similarities between beryllium and aluminum. That's what in case of the first group, right, we have a similar situation with the lithium. So lithium in fact will have diagonal relationship with magnesium, and we'll see, I mean, you know, just like the way we discussed in the case of the lithium, the reason why lithium has diagonal relationship with magnesium, right, in terms of similarity in terms of atomic or ionic radius, and also similarity in terms of charge by radius ratio. Same will be the case with beryllium and aluminum also, but we will discuss when we go to that particular section. Okay, so this is about the quick introduction to the group 2, which we also call as alkaline earth metals. Now the physical properties and all are given in the table 10.2. we will take a look at that as we go. But when we talk about the electronic configuration, right, so they will have 2 electrons in the s orbital of the outermost. Like if you look at the alkaline earth metals, they will have the electronic configuration like this: inert gas, ns2. That is the kind of an electronic configuration that they will have. Like look at it, beryllium, always, you know, all these will have 2 electrons in the outermost valence s orbital, and just like the alkali metals, where it will be inert gas ns1. In case of alkali metals, it is easy to remove the 1 electron, and alkaline earth metals, the formation of the ions will be again easier, and that is the reason why we will see that the compounds of alkaline earth metals, they also will be predominantly ionic. So just like the alkali metals, right, these alkaline earth metal compounds also predominantly ionic. So we will discuss about any anomalies and all that as we go into the further discussion about the specific group of compounds, but generally speaking, alkali metals compounds are most ionic among all the elements of the table. Next to that we will have the alkaline earth metals. And when we talk about the radius, right, the atomic and ionic radius of alkaline earth metals are smaller than those of the alkali metals. Like if you look at any period, so we will say sodium, next to sodium the magnesium, third period. So any period you take, the size of the alkaline earth metal will be lower than alkali metal. Why? Because this is the regular trend in period, right? When you move from left to right in any period, no more shells are added, and nuclear power is increasing, so the outermost shell will shrink. Same, okay. And if you look at the trend in terms of the group, okay, as we go down the group, what happens? The size will be increasing. So just like, you know, in any other regular group, and we move from beryllium to magnesium to calcium. So we'll see the exact values also. We'll see that both the atomic radius as well as ionic radius, both of them will be increasing as we go down the group. So this is about the trend in terms of the atomic and ionic radius. Now when it comes to the ionization enthalpy, the alkaline earth metals, they have low ionization enthalpies because of course here we are not comparing with the alkali metals. Leave alkali, and if you look at it right, in comparison to the other elements, just leave out the alkali, leave this one. Other than that, you compare with other elements, right? Then the size of the alkaline earth metal, this is the alkaline earth metal, right? Size of the alkaline earth metal is still high in comparison to the other elements. So they will have low ionization enthalpies. In fact, in a period, right, what happens when you move from left to right, ionization enthalpies will keep on increasing. So in any period, what do we observe? The ionization enthalpy of the alkali metal will be the least. So we can say it like this: the first ionization enthalpy of the alkaline earth metals, right, is higher than those of the group 1 metals. Because as we go from left to right, what happens? Ionization enthalpies will keep increasing. How do we look at it? Because the alkaline earth metal, we will see it will be what? Having a smaller size. Earth metal will have a smaller size, and thereby it becomes difficult to remove the electron. But when we talk about the second ionization enthalpy, see, second ionization enthalpy means already we removed one electron. Imagine. So we already have removed one electron, we have Na plus and Mg plus. If you want to remove one more electron, then the second ionization enthalpies of alkaline earth metals are smaller than those of the corresponding alkali metals. Understand what is the reason for this. When we say second ionization enthalpy means, look at it. Na plus means what is the arrangement? 1s2, 2s2, 2p6. Already this is the noble gas structure. So if you want to remove electron from that, means it is like disturbing the noble gas arrangement, right? So definitely it will be requiring lot of energy for disturbing the noble gas arrangement. And that is the reason why the second ionization enthalpies of alkali metals, right, they will be very, very high. Why? Because if you want to remove the second electron, means you are disturbing the octet. Okay, so when we talk about normally ionization enthalpy, means we are referring to first ionization enthalpy. So first ionization enthalpy of alkaline earth metals are higher than group 1, that is okay. But second ionization enthalpies of alkaline earth metals, they are smaller than the group 1. Why? Because when we use the word second ionization enthalpy for group 1, means already group 1 would have got noble gas arrangement. We are disturbing the noble gas. We are trying to remove one electron from the noble gas. That's why here we have to spend lot of energy. Okay. And the other important property in the discussion is the hydration enthalpy. So we have seen what is the importance of the hydration enthalpy to explain especially the reducing nature. The hydration enthalpies of alkaline earth metals will be decreasing with increase of ionic size. Remember, this is something that we have discussed in the case of the group 1 also. Hydration means what? When the cation or anion, whichever it is surrounded by, like say for example, we take beryllium 2 plus. When it is surrounded by the water molecules, that is what we call as the hydration phenomena. That will lead to release of energy, that is what we call as hydration energy. So the hydration energy will depend upon what is the charge density. So here when we look at the group 2, all the ions are having the same charge. The difference will only come in terms of the size. Charge density means what? Charge by size, right? As size is increasing, what happens? Charge density will decrease. So hydration also will decrease. So as you go down the group, what is happening? The ionic size is increasing, so hydration will decrease. Okay, so we can see the trend. Beryllium will get hydrated to a large extent, just like in the first group, right? Lithium will get hydrated the most. And the other thing is, if you want to compare, the hydration enthalpies of alkaline earth metals are larger than those of the alkali metal ions. This we can see through like actual values also. Like, you know, if you look at the compounds of the alkaline earth metals like magnesium or calcium, right? You can see when they form the hydrated compounds, we can see magnesium 6, calcium 6 water molecules, whereas sodium and potassium chloride, right, they will not form hydrates. In fact, in first group we have lithium as exception. So lithium chloride dot 2H2O, it will form a hydrate with 2 water molecules. Okay, so you can just go and refer to the discussion about the anomalous behavior about the lithium. Okay, but here the reason why the group 2 ions are more hydrated is because, what are we saying? Hydration depends upon the charge density, right? Look at the group 2. Group 2 has a 2 units charge, more charge. Divide by group 2 ions are always lesser in size than the group 1. So which means what? They have more charge and less size. So as a result, the charge density value, right? What happens? The charge density of the group 2 will be higher than the group 1. And that is the reason why we will see that the group 2 ions will get hydrated more than the group 1 ions. Talking about the physical properties, especially the appearance part, right? So they are silvery white, lustrous, they are also relatively soft. So when you talk about the group 1 like potassium and sodium, right, we can even cut them with a knife. But if you are comparing with the first group, right, these are relatively harder. So the hardness of this is because when you look at the metallic bonding strength, so this is another interesting point, metallic bonding strength will be more in group 2. Why? Because metallic bonding depends upon two things: number of electrons. More number of electrons released means more stronger the bonding, and second is size of atom. When the size of atom is less means that is also preferable, because smaller atoms, they can be held better by the sea of electrons. So remember, you know, this discussion keeps coming. You can even refer to our video of the chemical bonding where we discussed about the metallic bonding. Okay, so the group 2 metallic bonding strength is stronger than the group 1. That's why they are comparatively harder. Not only that, the melting and boiling points of group 2 are also higher than the alkali metals. Okay, and when you look at the electropositive nature, group 2 are also strong electropositive. And electropositive, how do we justify the electropositive nature? Because they have low ionization enthalpies. And when you look at the electropositive nature, obviously the electropositive nature will be increasing down the group. So when you move from beryllium to barium, the electropositive nature will be increasing. So in a way we can say the metallic nature also is what? When we move down the group, the metallic nature is basically increasing. And in group 1, we talked about the characteristic flame test to determine what is the element. So here this is an important thing. Not all group 2 elements will show the flame test. Calcium, strontium and barium, they will impact brick red. So brick red is for what? Is for the calcium. Crimson is for the strontium. Apple green is for the barium, and they can be identified by using the flame test. So what is flame test? When you are heating them with an oxidizing flame, they will the electrons will get excited. Again, de-excitation, the release of energy will be in the visible region. That's why we can see the color, and that will be a characteristic color. Now when we talk about the ones that are left out, which are beryllium and magnesium, the reason why they don't show the flame test is because the electrons in beryllium and magnesium are strongly held. In a way, it means that, you know, we will require more energy for the excitation. So more energy for the excitation means what? So if they are getting excited, so it is difficult for the excitation to be achieved by the normal flame. So if you supply the energy and get them excited, then the corresponding radiation rate will not be falling in the visible region. That is the reason why we don't see flame test given by the beryllium and magnesium. It is only for what? The calcium, strontium and barium. So this is a very important thing, the flame test, both for the alkali metals and also alkaline earth metals. Even the reason why we don't see the flame test for beryllium and magnesium. Okay, so wherever we are able to have the flame test, they can be used for the qualitative estimation. Like based on the color, we can tell what is the, say for example, if it is brick red, we can say what it is calcium. If it is crimson, we can say it is strontium. If it is apple green, we can say it is what? Barium. Like that, we can identify the elements. And just like alkaline, alkali metals, the group 2 also, they have high electrical as well as thermal conductivity, which are typical properties of the metals, because metals will have the mobile electrons, right? That makes them to be a good conductor of both heat as well as electric current. So that is along the lines of what we expect from the metal. So this is about the physical properties, and the stable 10.2, right? We mentioned about it. So we can see the ionization enthalpy as we go down the group, right? It is basically decreasing, and the second ionization enthalpy value. So because when we look at the elements, right? If you look at the 13th group, which is the boron, aluminum, gallium, indium and thallium. So we will talk up to ionization enthalpy 3. If you go to the 14th group, right, which is our carbon, silicon, germanium, and then we have tin and lead. So there we will talk about even up to 4th ionization enthalpy. Means we will talk about what is the successive energy required for removing one electron. So in fact, if you refer our video on the periodic classification of properties, right, we have an important question there. So like for a particular atom, if they give us IE1, IE2, IE3, IE4 like that, wherever we see a sudden jump, anywhere we see a sudden jump, right, it means what? That particular stage we are probably disturbing the noble gas arrangement. That is when we will see a sudden jump. Okay, and based on that we will be able to conclude what is the number of valence electrons of the element. So that is a very standard question, maybe you can refer to that. But here you can see the second ionization enthalpy values for every element, right? Beryllium, second ionization enthalpy is always higher than the first. Why? Because first means you have removed one electron from the neutral atom. Second time when you are removing, right, you are removing electron from already a cation. See, second ionization enthalpy means what? Already beryllium plus is there. You are trying to remove electron from that. It will be very difficult, because it is like what? Taking electron away from the positive charge. They both will attract each other, right? So that is the reason why you can see for every element, right, second ionization enthalpy will be always more than the first ionization enthalpy, because second ionization enthalpy means what? You are trying to remove the electron from a cation. So suppose we talk about, in another case, we talk about the third ionization enthalpy. Third ionization enthalpy will be higher. Why? Because you are trying to remove the electron from positive ion. Okay, so this is about the ionization enthalpies. And when we look at the hydration enthalpy, right, the hydration enthalpy, we can see beryllium will have a significantly higher value because of the small size and high charge density. That's why beryllium will get hydrated the most. And the hydration, because why is it negative? Because it is negative, indicating it is the amount of energy released. The hydration energy negative indicates it is released, but the values will keep decreasing as we go down the group. Now we can see metallic and ionic radius, right, both will be increasing down the group. Melting points and boiling points, we can see that they both will actually decrease. So why the melting points and boiling points are decreasing? This is just along the lines of what we discussed in the case of the group 1. As we go down the group, what happens? We have beryllium, small size, then we have magnesium, then we have size is increasing. As size is increasing, because each and every atom will give only 2 electrons for the metallic bonding, right? So as the atomic size increases, the metallic bonding strength will be decreasing. So thereby the melting points and boiling points will be decreasing. So this is just similar to the trend that we have in the first group also. Okay. Now talking about the chemical properties. So we talked about the physical properties. When we talk about the chemical properties, right, the reactivity of these elements, when we say reactivity, we are talking in terms of the reactivity, the way we look at in terms of the metallic nature or metallic behavior. The reactivity of the elements will be increasing down the group. Generally, when we talk about the metals, right, as we go down the group, metallic nature will be increasing. Same here also. So if you look at the reactivity towards the air or water, beryllium and magnesium, they are inert. So they will be able to form an oxide film on the surface and they will be staying inert. But if you make them into powder and somehow make them to react, beryllium will be able to burn brilliantly to give the oxide and nitride. Even magnesium, right, it will give, like if you see the firecrackers and all, they'll put, there are a lot of names that will come. Firecrackers, right, they'll give us, this dazzling brilliance, right. So they'll basically be having magnesium. So when they are burning in air means they will give us magnesium oxide and magnesium nitride. So remember, we have seen the similarities between lithium and magnesium. There we discussed about this. Calcium, strontium and barium, right, they will be able to readily react with air and even water also. So in fact they can even react with the cold water to form hydroxides. Okay, so the reactivity with air as well as water will be increasing down the group. And when we talk about the reactivity with halogens, right, other than beryllium, the other metals can easily react with the respective halogens directly to give the halides. Whereas in the case of beryllium, right, so BeF2 is conveniently prepared by the thermal decomposition of the complex NH4 twice BeF4. So when it is thermally decomposed, we will be able to get BeF2, and for BeCl2, right, we can make it by the reaction of beryllium oxide with coke and chlorine. So there we will be able to get beryllium chloride and carbon monoxide. So the thing is, the halides of the other group 2 elements other than beryllium, we can directly prepare them by the direct reaction. So when they combine with halogen at higher temperature, you will be able to get the halides. Exception is in case of beryllium. See, always remember, wherever we have the exceptions, right, this is where there can be a possible question. And when we talk about the reactivity with hydrogen, again same, except beryllium, right. So these other group 2 metals, they can easily combine with hydrogen. Hydrogen means what? H2 gas, and they will be able to form the hydrides. Whereas when it comes to BeH2, it is prepared indirectly. So the reaction of BeCl2 with lithium aluminum hydride, right, it will give us BeH2. And when it comes to reactivity with acids, the alkali metals, right, they will be able to readily react with acids, and when they react with acid, they will be able to, of course, liberate the hydrogen gas, which will how do you test the or detect the hydrogen gas? It will burn with a pop sound. And the other important chemical property is the reducing nature. So this we have seen, both the first group and second group, they are good reducing agents because they undergo oxidation, right? They are good reducing agent. So just like alkali metals, alkaline earth metals are also strong reducing agents. So how do we know they are strong reducing agents? If you look at the table, right, so the electrode potential values minus 1.97. See, remember, this point we already discussed in the reduction potential values, right? When you look at the table, if you have low reduction potential, means what? They can easily undergo oxidation. They can easily undergo oxidation means what? They are, because when they are undergoing oxidation means they are reducing others. They are good reducing agents, or we can say they are reducing power is high. So you see here all of them are what? Negative. But here we will discuss about some not anomaly, but some discrepancy when we compare this with the first group. So here the generally large negative values of the reduction potentials means what? These metals, they will be able to easily undergo oxidation, means they are able to act as a good reducing agents. So their reducing power is high. But when we look at the reducing power, right, the reducing power of the alkali metals is higher than the second group. So in a way what we can say is the reducing power of the alkaline earth metals, right, is less than that of the alkali metals. So if you look at the values in the first group, those values will be considerably higher. Okay, so the reducing power of alkali metals is more than the reducing power of the alkaline earth metals. Now when we look at the reason for that, so we'll have to see what are the steps involved in the overall reduction potential calculation. So there will be 3 stages. Okay, so I'll just briefly discuss about it. There will be 3 steps. The first step will be like metal in the solid, it has to undergo sublimation to form the gaseous. So here there will be energy that will be absorbed. That's what we call as the sublimation energy, or we can even say atomization energy. This is the first step. Second step will be the gaseous atoms, they have to lose electron, thereby they form the ion. It may be a monovalent ion or it depends. So here also energy will be required. That is what we call as the ionization enthalpy. The third stage is where if you are having it in solution, the gaseous ions they will get hydrated in water. So there we will have the hydration energy. This is the only energy that is released. Other 2 steps are about energy that is required or absorbed. Now the E0 values, right, they will be of course significantly affected by the hydration. That's what we will see as the reason why lithium plus, right, will have large negative value for the standard reduction potential. So just know here you can also just go and do a quick recap of the reduction potential discussion in our redox reaction chapter. Okay, now coming back to here, right, so the reason why lithium has got large negative value for the reduction potential is because lithium, due to the small size, it will have very high hydration energy, and that takes the dominance. Now when it comes to the comparison between the first and second group, right, the second group metallic bonding is stronger, so sublimation energy will be higher, and also second group, when we want to form the ions, the energy that has to be spent is more. So both these energy requirement value will increase. Of course we are saying they are also getting hydrated more, but since the energy that is required is also increasing, right, it takes the dominance. That is the reason why the second group elements, their the reduction potential values are what, in way less negative than the first group. That's why when you compare in terms of the reducing power, the reducing power of the second group is what, less than that of the alkali metals or the first group. And in first group what we have is lithium will have exceptionally more negative value, but beryllium, it is not the story. Beryllium has low or lesser negative value compared to the other alkali earth metals. Look at this. What about the beryllium? It is just minus 1.97. Others, look at it, minus 2.36, minus 2.84. So the reduction potential values are becoming more and more negative. The reduction potentials are becoming more and more negative as we move down the group. Now the reason for that is the reducing nature of beryllium, right, is primarily attributed because of the hydration energy. But the atomization energy, right, and the atomization energy means the sublimation energy part, and ionization energy, these two requirements are going to be very huge for beryllium, because in beryllium, due to the small size, right, it will be having very strong metallic bonding, and also the ionization enthalpy is also very high for the beryllium. So as a result of it, right, we will see that in case of beryllium, it is not going to have the exceptionally large negative value for the reduction potential. That is what we will see in the case of lithium. That kind of situation will not come in the case of beryllium. Okay, so beryllium will have less negative value for the reduction potential, and the reason for that is when you look at the small size of beryllium, right, that will be having high energy for sublimation or atomization, and also it will be requiring a large amount of energy for the ionization. So as a result of it, the beryllium will not be able to have, unlike lithium, right, lithium will be able to have what, large negative value of the reduction potential, like exceptionally large negative value, but beryllium it will not be happening. Okay, so both the case, of course, hydration enthalpy is more in both the cases, but that is compensated badly, or that is compensated to a great extent by the high energy requirement for the atomization and high energy requirement for the ionization in case of the beryllium. That is why we don't see beryllium having large negative value for the reduction potential. Okay, so this is about the trend in terms of the reducing power. And when we talk about the solutions in liquid ammonia, we have seen, alkali metals, they will give us a deep blue color solution. Same here also, we will get deep blue to black color solution, and that is because of the ammoniate. Okay, and when we look at the ammoniated electrons, the ammoniated electrons will be able to give rise to the color as well as the paramagnetic properties. But here the thing is, the ammoniate complex of the metal, they can be separated out. So in case of the alkali metals, this will not be the case, but here we can be separating the ammoniate complexes. But again, the color is because of the ammoniated electrons, the color as well as the paramagnetic properties, right? That is because of the ammoniated electrons. When we talk about the uses, the beryllium will be used in various alloys, including particularly the copper beryllium alloy, which are used in the high strength springs. And also beryllium as such, right, will be used in making windows of the X-ray tubes. And magnesium, it will be forming various alloys. So in metallurgy chapter, we will talk about what are the different alloys and the respective composition also. So magnesium will be able to form various alloys with aluminum, zinc, manganese, tin, and magnesium aluminum alloys, right? They are used in because they'll have certain properties like lightweight, etc. They will be used in the aircraft construction also. The magnesium powder as well as ribbon, right? So that is used because, as we said, right, so they can give us dazzling flame. They are used in flash powders, bulbs, incendiary bombs, and signals, etc. They can be used. And particularly the suspension of magnesium hydroxide. Suspension means it is not a true solution. Suspension of magnesium hydroxide in water, right? That's what we call as milk of magnesia. That is used as an antacid. So antacid is basically when we have acidity in our stomach, right? So what is this suspension of magnesium hydroxide means? It is a base only, right? So it will be able to go inside and then do the neutralization. So that's the role of the antacid. And magnesium carbonate, right? It is used as an ingredient in the toothpaste. And calcium is used in extraction of metals from oxides, where it is difficult for the carbon reduction. Generally, when we talk about getting a metal from the oxide, right, we will use a carbon reduction method. But wherever the carbon is not able to reduce, because calcium has got high affinity for oxygen, so the calcium can be used in that particular case. And calcium and barium metals, right, they have high reactivity for oxygen and as well as nitrogen. They can be used for creating the vacuum tubes, because when we remove air, still there can be some traces of the air, means predominantly what is there, we will have oxygen and nitrogen, right. So we can spray the calcium and barium and we will be able to see even the traces of the oxygen and nitrogen. They will react with calcium and barium and they will form the oxides and nitrates. That way we will be able to create more effective vacuum tubes. So radium, because it is radioactive, right, certain salts of radium, they will be used in radiotherapy, especially the cancer treatment part of it. So this is about the uses of the alkaline earth metals. And when we talk about the general characteristics, right, so general characteristics means if you look at the group 2 elements, they will form a di-positive cation, and the compounds of these elements, they are predominantly ionic. But when we compare the ionic nature with the group 1, right, they will be less ionic than the group 1. So how do we explain this? Based on the Fazan's rules. So what is the Fazan rule concept? If the size of cation is less, or if the charges are more, these are what the favorable conditions for the covalent nature. So you see here, when you have group 2 size is lesser than group 1. Group 2 charge is more because it is what, 2. So the higher nuclear charge and small size and the increased nuclear charge, right, that is the reason why they are going to be more towards the covalent trend when you compare it with the first group. But as such, they also have generally ionic nature, and if you look at the oxides or any of the other compounds, right, they will predominantly be ionic. So like, if you look at the oxides other than beryllium and magnesium, right, all the oxides are what, ionic. So beryllium and magnesium, they will have covalent nature, and when you look at the beryllium and magnesium compounds, we will see that in most of the cases they will have some kind of difference. In the first group we had only the exception with lithium, but here we will see that we have been talking both about beryllium and magnesium. Of course, beryllium will have quite different behavior from the rest of the elements, but we will see that both beryllium and magnesium also will have some kind of differences from the rest of the elements. Okay, so this is about the general characteristics. And moving on to the particular discussion, if you talk about oxides, okay, so the alkaline earth metals, they will burn in oxygen and they will be forming monoxide. Okay, so except for beryllium oxide, the others, they will have the rock salt structure. Rock salt structure means what? This is about the structure of sodium chloride. We will talk about this in the solid state. So beryllium oxide is essentially covalent in terms of the nature, and the enthalpies of formation of the oxides are also high. So when the enthalpy of formation is high means what? Those compounds have to be more thermally stable. Okay, so beryllium oxide, it will be also different from the rest of the oxides, because the rest of the oxides, one, they are ionic, and two, they have a basic nature or alkaline nature, but the beryllium oxide is amphoteric. So we can see that the beryllium oxide will react with both the acids as well as the bases, and the other than beryllium oxide, right, the other oxides, they are basic in nature, which means when you make them to react, they will be able to form hydroxide, but the hydroxides are sparingly soluble. The first group hydroxides are very much soluble in water, but the second group hydroxides are what sparingly soluble. That's why we have the suspension of magnesium hydroxide in water, right? That's what we call as milk of magnesia. Okay, so this is about the, talking more about the hydroxides. So the alkali metal hydroxides we have seen, whether it is sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide, all of them are having basic nature. And we have seen that as you go down the group, the basic nature will be increasing because the metal atoms become more electropositive. Same will be the case of the second group also. So alkaline earth metal hydroxides, they are also basic, but they will be less basic than the alkali metal hydroxides because they are less electropositive. So if you look at beryllium, right? So here also, as we go down the group, the basic nature will be increasing because the metal atoms become more electropositive. So beryllium hydroxide, if you look at it, right, it has got amphoteric nature. In fact, that is the reason why we don't put beryllium under the name alkaline earth metals. So you can see it will react with both acids as well as bases. With base, it will form berylate ion, BeOH4 whole 2 minus, and it will also react with acids. So the amphoteric nature of beryllium hydroxide, right, is the reason why we don't classify this as a alkaline earth metal. Okay, I'm talking about the hydroxides properties because this is where we can have some reasoning questions or trend based questions. You can see the solubility, thermal stability and basic nature, all of them will be increasing with increasing atomic number. Means as we go down the group, solubility, so let me give them numbers also. Okay, solubility, I'll call it as 1, that will be increasing. Thermal stability will be increasing. The third is basic nature. So one thing is a basic nature, right? As we go down the group, what happens? The electropositive character of the metals will increase, so basic nature obviously will be increasing. Now the thermal stability part, as we go down the group, the electropositive character increases, which also increase the thermal stability of these hydroxides. The solubility reasoning we will just see through a question because this is a question that is there in the NCERT solved example itself. Why does the solubility of alkaline earth metal hydroxide will increase down the group? So solubility means there will be two factors that will be important. So one is the lattice energy part and second is the hydration enthalpy part. Because if you want to make a substance to dissolve in water, means first we have to break the lattice, and then when it is dissolving, the hydration enthalpy will be released. So lattice energy is the energy required, hydration enthalpy is the energy that is released. Now if you look at the alkaline earth metal hydroxides, the anion will be common in all the cases, OH minus. So we'll have magnesium, of course there will be two OH minus ions, we'll have a calcium. So what happens is, as we go down the group, right, the cation size will be increasing. So remember lattice energy, we have mentioned about it already in the discussion of group 1 also. Lattice energy will be proportional to what? Q1 Q2 by R. Like we talk about the electrostatic potential energy. About this you would have covered a bit in the basic physics. Even otherwise we have discussed about this. You can refer to our videos on structure of atom. Okay, so here the thing is, when you look at any of these hydroxides, the charge part will remain the same for all of them. The only difference will come in the distance between both the nucleus. So look at it, you have a magnesium, smaller one. The distance from magnesium to the the center of OH minus hydroxyl ion will be lesser. So whereas if you look at the calcium, right, the distance will be increasing. So the R value will basically increase. R increasing means what? Lattice energy will decrease. Okay, so lattice energy or lattice enthalpy will decrease. There is one more thing, that is the hydration enthalpy. See, hydration enthalpy also decreases as we go down the group. Why? Because the comparison is magnesium will be more hydrated than calcium and so on. Correct. So lattice energy is decreasing, hydration enthalpy is also decreasing. But if you look at the actual trend, what we'll observe is the lattice energy decrease will be much more than the hydration enthalpy decrease. As we go down the group, the lattice energy will decrease and the hydration enthalpy also decrease. But which will decrease more? The lattice energy decrease will more. Okay. So as a result, it will make the substances to be more soluble. So the increase in solubility is because here both these things are decreasing. Lattice energy is decreasing, hydration enthalpy is also decreasing, but the decrease in lattice energy is higher. Lattice energy is what energy that has to be spent first to break the substance, break the lattice of the solid. Then hydration enthalpy is the energy that is released. So energy required is decreasing more. So it becomes easy for the substances to dissolve. Okay, so this is about the solubility reasoning. And when we talk about the halides, right, except beryllium halide, others are all ionic in terms of nature. So in fact, beryllium halides, right, like if you look at beryllium chloride, it has got a chain structure, the polymeric chain structure in the solid state. So even if you look at the gaseous state, right, it will exist as gaseous or vapor state, it will exist as the dimers. Okay, so the molecule structure will be like this, BeCl. It will be exist as a dimer. So this is very similar to the case of aluminum. Aluminum also, right, in vapor state AlCl3 will exist as a dimer. So this is where we can see some similarities between beryllium and aluminum, the diagonal relationship. Okay, and if we heat it to very high temperature at around 1200 Kelvin, we will see that the dimer will be broken down into the monomer, which is the actual BeCl2. Okay, so all these BeCl2, AlCl3, these are all electron deficit molecules. So we have seen this in our chemical bonding chapter discussion. And electron deficit molecules means they will have a tendency to accept lone pair of electrons given by some electron rich species. So thereby, remember in the ionic equilibrium chapter, we talk about the theories of acid and base, right? So these electron deficit molecules, they can act as Lewis acids. So we'll discuss about it in a while. This property of AlCl3 and BaCl2, right, is useful in the reactions of organic chemistry also. So we call them as Fidelkraft's reactions. We'll talk about it a little later, okay, when we discuss about the similarities between beryllium and aluminum. And the halides, right, they will form hydrates. So as you can see, magnesium chloride, 8 molecules of water, calcium. So the when you go to barium, right, it is just having 2 water molecules. Means what? As we go down the group, the tendency to form hydrates decreases. Why? Because the ions are becoming larger, so they will not be able to attract more water molecules. Okay, so the dehydration of dehydration means what? Making the molecule to lose the water. So the dehydration of chlorides or bromides or iodides of calcium, strontium, barium can be achieved just on heating. Okay, so the chlorides or bromides or iodides, so when we heat them, they will be able to lose the water molecules and we will get the anhydrous state. But in case of the beryllium and magnesium, right, so when we heat it, what happens is there will be a chance for the hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means what? In ionic equilibrium we have studied it. The respective ions, right, they will react with the water molecules, which means what? Beryllium 2 plus will react with water or Mg2 plus will react with water. Okay, so this is about the difference between beryllium magnesium. Remember, we have said in the second group, yes, beryllium will have quite different properties from other elements, but magnesium also sometimes will have different properties. Okay, so and in terms of the solubility part, so just looking at the lattice energy comparison, right, the fluorides will be relatively less soluble than chlorides. Why? Because if you look at a fluoride ion, it's a small ion, So anything you take, like say for example, we are talking about magnesium fluoride and comparing this with magnesium chloride. So the R value, right, in the lattice energy formula, the R value will be less for the fluorides. So which means what? Fluorides will have more lattice energy. Fluorides will be having more lattice energy, thereby it is difficult for them to dissolve in comparison to the chlorides. So this is about now with regard to the oxoacid salts, right? Oxoacids means already in the discussion about group 1 we talked about it, like the acids which will have hydrogen that will come out as proton attached to oxygen, whether it is carbonic acid or sulfuric acid or phosphoric acid, all of them we will call them as oxoacids. In fact, we'll discuss about them when we go to the respective groups, P block, that will come in +2 syllabus. So here first beginning with the carbonates, the alkaline earth metal carbonates, right, they are insoluble in water and they can be precipitated by adding sodium or ammonium carbonate to the solution of the calcium or magnesium ions, which are the group 2. And this is the idea that is used for the purification of water. Purification means removal of the hardness of water. Okay. So if you look at the reason for the hardness of water, it is the soluble calcium and magnesium ions. When we add sodium carbonate, right? In fact, you remember we discussed this as one of the uses of the sodium carbonate in the group 1 video. Okay. So what happens is the corresponding magnesium carbonate or calcium carbonate, right? They will precipitate, and that is how we can remove the hardness of water. The solubility of carbonates in water will decrease as we go down the group, and same will be the case of the sulfates also. So the solubility will be decreasing as we go down the group. So we will see together. In fact, there is a next question, in text question that is there. In that question we will see the reason for that. So just make a note of it, the solubility, why it will decrease as we go down the group, both for carbonates as well as sulfates. And the carbonates, right, will decompose on heating. So if you look at the products of it, they will be giving us the carbon dioxide and the respective metal of the metal oxides. Okay, beryllium carbonate will be the unstable one, and we can only maintain it in an atmosphere of CO2. So otherwise this reaction, right, it's an unstable one, so it will easily want to decompose to give the beryllium oxide and carbon dioxide. So when we maintain this in an atmosphere of CO2, it is like, the reaction as per the Le-Chatelier principles, right, this reaction would not be favored in the forward direction. So that's how we can maintain beryllium carbonate. And thermal stability of these carbonates, right, will be increasing with the increase of cation size. So remember, carbonate ion is a large anion. Large anion can be balanced by large cations. That is how the thermal stability will be increasing down the group. Now when it comes to the sulfates, right, sulfates will be in terms of the physical appearance, they will be white solids, and they are also stable to heat. So if you look at the beryllium and magnesium, they will readily dissolve in water. The main reason is the beryllium and magnesium, right, they will have a very large hydration enthalpy, and that will overcome whatever is the lattice energy requirement to break. So beryllium and magnesium, they will be readily soluble, but whereas the others, right, they are relatively less soluble. But the point is, as we go down the group, just like in case of the carbonates, solubility will be what? Decreasing. Solubility in water will be decreasing. So we will see the reason for that. So look at this. This is an in-text question. Why the solubility of second group carbonates and sulfates decrease down the group? So if you look at a carbonate ion, large anion, or a sulfate, that is also large anion. So on one side you have the large anion, other side we have the cations, whether we are talking about calcium or whether we are talking about strontium, or as we go down the group, what happens? The cation size will be increasing. But the thing is, if you look at the lattice energy formula, right, what is it? We will say lattice energy is proportional to the product of the charges divided by the distance between the two nuclei. Since the anion radius is already large, the lattice energy change will not be affected much. The cation radius is increasing, but that will not be significantly affecting the lattice energy. So the lattice energy kind of almost remaining a constant, because the anion radius is already so large that any additional increase in the cation radius, right, is not going to make much difference. But as we go down the group, definitely what the hydration enthalpies will decrease. Small cations will be hydrated more. So as the hydration enthalpy is decreasing, what it means, the solubility also has to decrease, because there are two steps, right? First we have to break the lattice. For that we will have to spend energy, that is the lattice energy. That is almost remaining a constant. Second thing is what the energy released when it is dissolving, that is the hydration enthalpy. The hydration enthalpy is what? Decreasing. So it becomes difficult for the substances to dissolve. And that is what we see. As we go down the group, the solubility of both carbonates as well as sulfates will be decreasing. Now when it comes to the nitrates, the nitrates can be prepared by dissolving carbonates in dilute nitric acid. So you take the respective carbonate and dissolve this in dilute nitric acid, we will be able to obtain the corresponding nitrates. If you look at the nitrates, right, they will be crystallizing as hydrated salts, like magnesium nitrate, it will crystallize with 6 water molecules. Whereas if you go down the group, right, when it comes to something like barium, it will crystallize just as anhydrous salt. So basically meaning, as we go down the group, right, the tendency to form hydrated salts is actually decreasing. So this is something that we already seen before, because the cation size is increasing, right? So thereby the charge density will decrease, and that's why the hydration level will decrease. Also the tendency to form hydrated salts also will be decreasing. Okay, and these nitrates, they decompose when we heat them. They decompose just like the lithium nitrate. Remember, in the first group, right, only the lithium nitrate will decompose to give oxide, whereas the other nitrates, like if you are heating sodium nitrate, it will give us the corresponding nitrites will come. That is the difference between lithium and the other first group. So you can see the second group, what happens, they will just dissociate like the lithium. So we will get oxide, NO2, and then oxygen. Now talking about the beryllium, right, so we've been saying through some of the properties or some of the categories of compounds, how beryllium will be different from the rest of these elements. So if you look at the beryllium, it will not only have anomalous behavior compared to the other elements, but also it will have a diagonal relationship with aluminum. So beryllium, below that we will have magnesium. 13th group we will have boron and aluminum. So we will have a diagonal relationship. We will see what is the reason for, generally what is the reason for the diagonal relationship. Similarity in terms of the size, atomic and ionic sizes, and also the similarity in terms of charge by radius ratio. So looking at what are the anomalous behavior of beryllium, it has got exceptionally small size compared to the other elements, and also it has got very high aeration enthalpy. And because it has got very high aeration enthalpy and small size cation, right, most of the compounds will be what? They will be covalent. And also these ions will get easily hydrolyzed, whereas the other ions, right, they will not get hydrolyzed. We have seen that in the discussion of the chlorides, right, what we said is when these chlorides, the hydrated form of the chlorides, when we heat them, right, generally the others will lose the water molecules, whereas the beryllium and magnesium, right, they will be getting hydrolyzed. It means these ions will react with water. That is the difference between the beryllium magnesium and the other chlorides, the hydrated form of the chlorides. When we heat them, what happens? Beryllium also, because it does not have in the valence orbit, right, beryllium, the valence orbit is second orbit. Second orbit has got only s subshell and p subshell, so it cannot extend the valency, the maximum valency that because beryllium, right, what is the beryllium electronic arrangement? 1s2 2s2. So we'll have is the and 2p will be there. So the outermost orbit has got only 2 subshells, so it can show a maximum valency of only 4 by engaging these 4 orbitals which are in the outermost shell. But whereas when you go to magnesium or the other elements below, right, they can even use, because magnesium means what is the valence orbit? Third orbit. So third orbit will also have d subshell. So they can use those empty orbitals and show the coordination number of 6 by using those empty d orbitals. But in case of beryllium, it can only go up to maximum 4. Now the oxides and hydroxides of beryllium, right, the other elements of the group, we say that they are having basic nature, but the beryllium, they will be having amorphic nature. We have even seen the reaction also, hydroxide, how it will react with both acids as well as bases. With bases, right, it will react with OH minus to form berylate ion, remember. So BeOH4 times 2 minus, that's what it will form when it is reacting with the bases. Now the diagonal relationship between beryllium and aluminum, right, so look at it, the radius and the charge by radius ratio, they are almost similar to that of the aluminum, and that is mainly the reason. In fact, when we talked about the diagonal relationship between lithium and magnesium also, we have seen the similar reason. And if you look at what is the outcome, right, what is the outcome? Like aluminum, beryllium also is not readily attacked by the acids, because it will form an protective oxide layer. So aluminum as well as beryllium, right, they will be forming immediately a protective oxide layer on the surface of the metal, so they are not readily attacked by the acids. Beryllium hydroxide, right, it can dissolve in excess alkali to form berylate ion. Just like aluminum will be able to form what? Aluminate ion. So this is where the beryllium hydroxide and aluminum hydroxide, they are able to react with the bases. Chlorides of both beryllium and aluminum, right, they have the bridge structure in the vapor phase. I've shown you that also, bridge structure. So the BeCl2, how it will exist as a dimer. And because these are electron deficit molecules, right, we mentioned, remember, they will be able to act as Lewis acids, and of course they will be soluble in organic solvents. They will act as Lewis acid, and this property is used in Friedel-Crafts reactions. So Friedel-Crafts will have Friedel-Crafts alkylation, Friedel-Crafts acylation, like that we will see the reactions in organic chemistry when we talk about the reactions of the benzene. Okay, so just make a note of it here. We don't need to discuss it, just just make a note of it. We will see it when we go to the organic chemistry. And the property that is used is what? The idea that they can act as a Lewis acid, because they can accept lone pair of electrons. Now the beryllium and aluminum, right, they will have a strong tendency to form complexes, like BeF4 2 minus can be formed, AlF6 3 minus can be formed. Again, the idea of forming complexes is also because of partly the electron deficit nature. Now coming to the important compounds of calcium, right, so we have quicklime. So the other compounds that we'll discuss anyway are calcium oxide, which is the quicklime. We'll also talk about the calcium hydroxide, calcium sulfate and calcium carbonate, and also cement. Okay, so the calcium oxide or quicklime is prepared by using the rotary kiln method, which is where we will heat the limestone. Limestone is calcium carbonate. When we heat it to a very high temperature, 1070 to 1270 Kelvin temperature, the calcium carbonate will dissociate. It will decompose into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Now the thing is, carbon dioxide will be in the gaseous state, other two will be in the solid state. So I think we would have seen this equation analysis in our equilibrium chapter or even thermodynamics. So in order to push the reaction forward, right, the product carbon dioxide that is formed is immediately removed, because when you remove the product means what? Because it is an equilibrium reaction, right? When you remove the product, the reaction will proceed in the forward direction. So in order to make the reaction to proceed in the forward direction, this can be a reasoning question, like why in the preparation of calcium oxide the product carbon dioxide is immediately removed. What is the reason for that? Because when you remove the product as per the Le-Chatelier principles, right, removing the product means what? Reaction has to proceed in the forward direction. So we will be able to achieve completion of the reaction. Calcium oxide, if you see it, it will be a white amorphous solid, and it's got a melting point of 2870 Kelvin. So it's not like they will give us questions on exact numbers, but when we look at what happens to the calcium oxide on exposure to the atmosphere, right, it will be able to absorb moisture to form calcium hydroxide, and also it can react with the carbon dioxide of the atmosphere to form calcium carbonate. So the addition of small amount of water, right, to the quicklime, it can actually break the lump. So if you experience this practically, you will be able to see how the breaking of the lump will happen. Even small amount of water you put, right, so the lump will actually break down, and that process is what we call as the slaking of the lime. Okay, so when we have the quicklime, which is calcium oxide, that is slaked with, slaking means what, adding limited amount of water. Okay, when it is slaked with the soda, that's what we call as soda lime. Soda means we're talking about the sodium hydroxide. So that substance we call it as what, soda lime. So just make a note of it. We will see the use of this in organic chemistry. Soda lime will be used. Okay, and since this is a basic oxide, calcium oxide is a basic oxide, right, it can combine with acidic oxides. At high temperatures, it can combine with acidic oxides. Like look at this, calcium oxide can combine with silicon dioxide. Silicon dioxide is what, acidic. It will give us what, calcium silicate. And calcium oxide can be reacting with phosphorus oxide to form calcium phosphate. Okay, so the calcium oxide is an important primary material in the manufacture of cement. So we'll see that when we go to the composition of cement, and also it is the cheapest form of alkali because it is easily available at a low cost, and it is used in the manufacture of sodium carbonate from the caustic soda. So what is caustic soda? Sodium hydroxide. So from sodium hydroxide we can make sodium carbonate by using calcium oxide, and it is also employed in the purification of sugar and the manufacture of dyestuffs. The other important compound in the group 2 is calcium hydroxide, which is the slaked lime. So how do you prepare calcium hydroxide? By adding water to the quicklime. So you can see here, this is what is the slaked lime. Okay, so when we add water to the calcium oxide, we will be able to obtain the calcium hydroxide, but calcium hydroxide is only sparingly soluble in water. It will not be completely soluble. So if you look at the aqueous solution, these wordings also can be important, especially in NEET kind of examination. We may get these questions also. The aqueous solution will be known as a lime water, whereas the suspension, right, is known as a milk of lime. Like remember, we talked about milk of magnesia. What is milk of magnesia? It is a suspension of magnesium hydroxide in water that is used as an antacid. Similarly here, the true solution is called as lime water, suspension is called as what? Milk of lime. Now when we are passing carbon dioxide through the lime water, right, it will turn milky because of the formation of the calcium carbonate. This is a standard test for the detection of carbon dioxide. Okay, now when we are passing excess amount of carbon dioxide, right, what happens is this reaction will further proceed to give us the bicarbonates or hydrogen carbonate. So milk of lime, right, when it is reacting with chlorine, it will form hypochlorite, CaOCl twice. Okay, and that is used as a major component of the bleaching powder. Okay, now the uses of calcium hydroxide, it is used in preparing mortar. Mortar is a building material that is used in the construction, and it is a substance that is used for whitewash, the whitewashing of the walls, right? So you see that they'll bring the bags of the quicklime and then they'll put it in water and then they'll start whitewashing. So this is mainly also because of the disinfectant nature that the calcium hydroxide is having. It is also used in glass making and also tanning industry, and this is used for the preparation of bleaching powder, as we have seen just now, and the purification of the sugar. The next compound is the calcium carbonate. So calcium carbonate, right, this is naturally available in the form of limestone, chalk, marble, And if you want to prepare this inside the laboratory, right, how do we prepare it? When we pass carbon dioxide into the slag lime, we will be able to obtain the calcium carbonate. And even when we are reacting sodium carbonate with calcium chloride, right, there also we can get calcium carbonate. Okay, so in the passing of carbon dioxide into the slag lime, right, if we are passing excess carbon dioxide, means what happens? We will be getting hydrogen carbonate, that we have seen already. So we will be getting calcium bicarbonate or hydrogen carbonate, which will be soluble in water. So that should be avoided. We should only supply limited amount of carbon dioxide, so that we will get the calcium carbonate precipitate. Calcium carbonate, you can see it's a white fluffy powder and almost insoluble in water. That is a property that is used for the removal of calcium ions from hard water, because when you convert the calcium ions into calcium carbonate, that will separate out because it is insoluble. And when we heat it above 1200 Kelvin, right, it will be able to give us a calcium oxide. We have seen this. This is a method for the preparation of calcium oxide. Talking about the reactions, it will react with dilute acid to liberate carbon dioxide gas. Calcium carbonate with HCl, right, it will give us carbon dioxide gas. Calcium carbonate with sulfuric acid also will give us what? Carbon dioxide. So where do we use carbonate? It is used in the building industry. Okay, so in the form of marble and in the manufacture of quicklime, because quicklime is manufactured from the calcium carbonate heating. And calcium carbonate, right, along with magnesium carbonate, is used as a flux in the extraction of metals such as iron. So this we will see in the metallurgy chapter +2, because in the extraction of iron, right, we'll have a impurity silicon dioxide. So the calcium carbonate will be added along with the iron ore into the furnace. We call it as blast furnace. There first the calcium carbonate will dissociate into calcium oxide. The calcium oxide will react with silicon dioxide to form calcium silicate. Okay, so this will be removed. The impurity silicon dioxide will be removed through the formation of the calcium silicate, and the substance that is used to facilitate that, right, that is what we call as the flux. Okay, so we'll anyway talk about it again when we go to the metallurgy. The specially precipitated calcium carbonate, right, is used in the manufacture of high quality paper. Okay, and also this is used as an antacid, mild abrasive in toothpaste. So abrasive means basically to give the polishing effect. And also it is a constituent of chewing gum, and it is used as a filler in the cosmetics. Like, cosmetic, you will have the basic ingredient. Filler means what? Something that is used to add mass. Okay, so all these are the next compound that we have for calcium is plaster of Paris, which is calcium sulfate hemihydrate. So gypsum, which is calcium sulfate dot 2H2O. So you'll have two water molecules of crystallization. When we heat it up to 300 Kelvin, right, it will lose the water of crystallization partially and it will form the hemihydrate. So the plaster of Paris, we can either write it like this: calcium sulfate dot half H2O, or we can also write like 2 calcium sulfate dot H2O. Either ways, it is like what? 2 molecules of calcium sulfate is having 1 molecule of water. If we heat it further above 393, then even this water that is there in plaster of Paris also will be lost, and we will get the anhydrous form of calcium sulfate. That is what we call as the dead burnt plaster. So this can be a possible question. What is dead burnt plaster? So what is dead burnt plaster? It is anhydrous calcium sulfate. That's it. Now the importance of the plaster of Paris, right, is because of its very peculiar property, which we call as the setting. Setting of plaster of Paris, when you mix with adequate amount of water and allow it to set for about 5 to 15 minutes, right, we'll see that it will actually solidify into crystalline form of gypsum. So we actually call it as orthorhombic form of gypsum. These details will not be that much required, but what happens is it will solidify into a very hard structure. And if you look at people who are going for who have a bone fracture or a sprain, right, so we'll create the gypsum, we'll have a gypsum covering, plaster of Paris covering on that. The plaster of Paris covering, basically when it is setting, means it will convert itself into what? The orthorhombic form of gypsum. So for immobilizing the affected parts of organ where you have a fracture or a sprain, right, we will create this plaster of Paris cover. And also this is used in the construction industry for making these designs, etc. Even in dentistry, as well as for making ornaments also we will use plaster of Paris. And for making the casts, so for creating statues, etc., we will require a cast. So the casts are also made up of plaster of Paris. Now cement is, of course, is the substance of national importance. For the growth of any country, we require cement along with steel, because it is used for making of, for creating buildings, bridges, all these things. 1824, it was introduced in England first. And since it resembles the limestone that is quarried from the island of Portland near England, right? That's why this is also given the name Portland cement. So if you look at the Portland cement, we have lime along with silica and oxides of aluminum, iron and magnesium. So this can be a possible question, what is the composition of the Portland cement? I think in one of the previous years also they have asked. So Portland cement, the composition will be calcium oxide around 50 to 60, silica 20 to 25, alumina 5 to 10, magnesium oxide is 2 to 3, Fe2O3 is 1 to 2, SO3 is 1 to 2. For obtaining a good quality cement, right? So if you can maintain the silica to alumina ratio as 2.5 to 4, that will be able to give us a good quality cement. And even the ratio of calcium oxide to the other oxides means silica, alumina and Fe2O3, if you maintain the ratio to be close to 2, we will be able to get a good quality cement. So when you vary this composition, right, the quality of cement also will be varying. I'm sure when you go and buy the cement, you will see different grades of the cement, right? Obviously, the different grades of cement will have something to do with the quality aspect of it. The manufacture of cement or the making of cement will basically start with the clay and lime mixed together and then heated. They'll form a fuse when they're heated, and that's what we call as a cement clinker. And the clinker will then be added with gypsum around 2 to 3%. And finally, if you look at the chemical composition of the Portland cement, we'll have dicalcium silicate. So sometimes we can even get questions on the formula itself, like they can ask us what is the formula for the dicalcium silicate, like that. So dicalcium silicate around 26%, tricalcium silicate around 51%, and tricalcium aluminate Ca3Al2O6, that is around 11%. So these chemical formulas also we need to remember. The working of cement is based on the idea of setting of cement, like the way we have discussed in the case of plaster of Paris, right? Here when you mix cement with water and allow to set, it will be converting itself into a very hard mass, and this happens because of the hydration of the molecules as well as the rearrangement in the crystal structure. And we have said that no gypsum is added. So the purpose of adding gypsum, right, is to delay the process of setting. So when you delay the process setting, you are giving sufficient time for the hardening to happen. So this can be another possible question. Why do we add gypsum to the cement? It is to slow down the process of setting of the cement. The cement is, of course, a commodity of national importance. So concrete or reinforced concrete, all these, plastering, construction of any, bridges, dams, buildings, everything is done by using what? Cement. The biological importance of group 2 elements. So in group 1 we said sodium ions and potassium ions, they are very much required for the biological activity. Just like that in group 2 we have magnesium and calcium. We can see in comparison with iron and copper, right? So our body, adult body, will require around 25 grams of magnesium and 1200 grams of calcium, because calcium is the main part of our bone as well as the teeth. If you put this in contrast to iron and copper, right, the body will have only 5 grams of iron and 0.06 grams of copper. It is not like they will ask questions based on the number, but just to get an idea. So where magnesium will play a role, all the enzymes that are using ATP in phosphate transfer. So all these things will not be that much required for us in terms of how the mechanism actually happens, but just to understand the importance of it, you will anyway cover these things in bio. So the enzymes that utilize ATP in the phosphate transfer, they will be requiring magnesium as a cofactor. Cofactor means the substance that is added to increase the activity of the enzyme. That's what we call as a cofactor. And magnesium is also the main pigment in the chlorophyll. So chlorophyll A or chlorophyll B, the main pigment is what? Magnesium. And if you look at about 99% of the calcium in the body, right, it is present in bones and teeth. So predominantly the majority of the calcium is present in the bones and teeth. Not just that, the calcium, right, also plays very crucial function, like in the blood coagulation. You will learn all these things in different chapters of bio. It will be also playing a role in neuromuscular function, neural transmission, as well as the cell membrane integrity. So there are a lot of roles that calcium will be able to play in our human body. And the calcium concentration in our human body, right, is maintained, which is about 100 milligram per liter in plasma. The calcium concentration will be maintained by the activity of two hormones. So one is calcitonin and the other is parathyroid hormone. So in bio you will get all these things, the parathyroid hormone, right, you call it as the PTH. So these two hormones, they will play counter role in the sense, if you look at say for example, the calcium level is raising above the certain point, then the thyroid gland will release calcitonin. So it will try to decrease the level. Okay. And if the calcium level is falling below point, then the parathyroid gland, right, that will release the PTH. So PTH will try to raise the blood calcium levels. So the calcitonin, it will try to reduce the blood calcium levels. PTH will try to increase the blood calcium levels. They actually play the counter role, and that's how the calcium level in the blood will be maintained. Okay, so all these things again you will revisit in your bio part. But yeah, if you look at the importance of calcium, we said bones and teeth, they are made up of calcium. So contrary to what we normally think, this is again something that you will be learning as a part of your bio. Bones are not fixed structures. Okay, so we'll see that the bones composition will be continuously changing. Okay, so they will be getting solubilized and then redeposited. So to the extent of 400 milligrams per day, that much amount of redeposition will be happening in the bones. So it is not like bones are fixed structures, and they will be solubilizing as well as the redeposition happening. Okay, so this is about the biological importance of the two group 2 elements, which are magnesium and calcium. So with this we have covered the NCERT as it is review of group 2 of the S block. Hope this is useful, and we will see in the next chapter.